to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton, and welcome to a manager review segment where we are going to be looking back tonight on Sam Allardyce's 6 months in charge of Everton. We're probably all wondering to each other right now, what did we do in a past life to deserve this? But nonetheless, we're going to try and get through it. I'm joined by Owen Parkes as well as Terry McAllister, of course, and we'll start with you on your Toffee Blues debut, Owen. How did you feel about the Allardyce appointments? Obviously, you were in a bad place, but how did you feel when it became common knowledge he was going to be appointed?
See, I was a bit different to everyone else at the time because, as odd as it is to say, before he actually got the Everton job, I was quite a big fan of Sam Allardyce. He was never someone who I liked quite personally because he always rubs you off the wrong way, whether it be after match interviews or whatnot. But I thought as a football manager, as an actual manager, I've always thought he got quite a tough rap, especially at West Ham, where I thought he did a decent job. But it was always the case for me that as much as I thought he was a good manager, even I still sort of say he still is a good manager, I just never think he was ever an Everton manager, because to be an Everton manager, you've got to be a certain way, and he was never that way. And I said before and I said after, it was a poor move from the club to bring Allardyce in, not because he couldn't do a job, and I think if we'd have kept him on, he would have continued to do a sort of 1-win-3 job. I just never thought that Allardyce as a manager is someone who is supposed to, whose strength is working at a club with ambition and ultimately Everton. But like you say, we were in a terrible situation. David Unsworth at that point has almost thrown the towel in, hadn't he? There's loads of other names linked, Silva, Fonseca, other names. But it came to the point where we had literally nowhere else to go. And as much as it was a terrible move from the club to appoint someone who didn't necessarily fit in with the line that the club wanted to go in, I understand why they did it, and I understand why he took it as well, even though it ultimately didn't work out for him either, what he wanted to do when he came in.
I mean, I think that's the main reason we ended up appointing him was, of course, the situation we were in. We'd just been whacked off Southampton. I don't know if any of you guys watched that game.
Yeah.
That was one of the most terrifying displays. That could have been more than 4.
Yeah, they were
horrid.
Yeah, they were really poor as well.
Yeah, I think that was the point where I think people finally started to get it in their heads that we were in serious trouble. And obviously, you go calling for fireman Sam. Was it a bit too, did we jump the gun a little bit, do you think? Terry, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think we jumped the gun. I think the situation we were in displayed the naivety of the board at Everton, who hadn't been in the position that they were in before. Like, we were never, ever in serious danger of going down. We were terrible. I'm not going to rewrite history and say we looked good, but you can't win 2 games and then suddenly be, clear of the drop zone and think you're in serious trouble of going down. This appointment was it just screamed naivety. I think personally that Ronald Koeman wouldn't have done any worse than what Allardyce did once he took over, given the same scenario. If once Koeman got to January, if he'd have been able to, not even buy different players, if he'd have added Tosin and Walcott, a bit of pace and a bit more experience up front, was Calvert-Lewin, still developing at that point. I just think it exposed that the decision makers at the club were a little bit, panicky, because all the press were talking as if these are doomed and all this investment in the summer and it's all been for naught. Allardyce's appointment, I was the opposite of Owen, really. I liked him as a person. I found him entertaining. Didn't really agree with some of the stupid things he'd come out with,
vote leave and all that crap.
Yeah, like that. But I always found him quite entertaining and quite funny. But I never liked him as a football manager. And you look at his career, and he's basically banged the same drum his whole career, saying he's been, miscast as, this negative football manager, and it's like it's snobbery for English managers. And if only he has a chance at a bigger, job, he'd show what he was made of. Well, this Everton job was his opportunity. The best opportunity of his career to show that he was telling the truth, that if he got a big job, he could be a better manager, but he didn't have to, fight fires for like a 5 or 6 game period towards the end of the season. And instead of disproving all the, reputation and that he had, he just basically he solidified it. He's like, yeah, you're at Everton now with resources you've never been able to have before, and, with more time than you usually get when you come in mid-season, with better players. And what did he do? What he always does: horrendous football, obnoxious personality, taking on the supporters, everything. He just did everything. He reverted the type on what he's done at every club. And it's no surprise that every club he's been at, whose ambition is anything higher than stay in the league at all costs, he's been disliked and hounded out. Newcastle, West Ham, now Everton. Any club that wasn't just grateful to survive didn't like Sam Allardyce, and he couldn't have that. He railed against the negative response from Evertonians, which it wasn't all Evertonians, but certainly a vocal section especially in the travelling support as well. He couldn't hack it because he's used to being praised for doing the bare minimum. So I look back on the Allardyce appointments as just a black eye on the club, because we didn't need to appoint him. He brought the reputation of the club low by association with him. I have nothing nice to say about Sam Allardyce. He's just an absolute disastrous appointment and a horrendous dickhead of a person. But well, not as a person, as a football manager, he's quite nice as a person.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think you've been a bit harsh on him there. We did win the second half of that 3-1 defeat against City, so,
Yeah, well,
wow.
That's what I mean. He that's the type of thing he used to come out with. He'd lose games, and he'd lose matches, and he'd say, "It's not my fault if they don't listen to what I'm saying." It's like, you're the manager. He publicly, criticised players he wasn't playing. Like Davy Klaassen, for example, got 10 minutes of game time under Allardyce, other than a Europa League dead rubber. And he'd say some players haven't lived up to their billing. It's like, neither of you. Like, criticising players publicly. Burnley, when the away supporters were booing at the performance at the end and unhappy, and he was asked about it, he starts laughing in the post-match interviews. Just like, he just wasn't an Everton manager.
I'll be honest, I completely forgot about the Burnley thing, and oh my goodness, yeah.
Everything, mate. We haven't even touched on the football yet. Just him as a personality was an ill fit for Everton, if you'd ask me. He was too much about himself. Jamie Carragher said that he went, if he can drop the big Sam act and really get stuck into this job, this could be his best opportunity at a massive job. But he couldn't drop the act. It's not in his nature. He has to be the big Sam show. And,
he's an egomaniac, isn't he?
Yeah, if he was chocolate, he'd eat himself. The Donald Trump of football. All the criticism of him, no matter whatever the evidence is of your eyes and ears, no matter, we're watching these matches, Sam, but it's all fake news. He's not playing defensively. He's not negative, and it's, yeah. He riles me up just thinking about him, the absolute slug.
There you go. Obviously, that's the personality quirks out of the way. We'll get on to the football.
I'll give Owen a word now. He might not.
I was going to say it's going to get better, but it isn't really, is it, when you think about it? I mean, we've got... we'll go through the good month. We had December where we actually won a lot of our games, and any sort of fear of being in the relegation scrap was taken away. We were 8th or 9th by the end of December. And whatever fire that he was brought in to fight, if there was one, was put out by the turn of the year. So, we did do well. And obviously there was the whole, he completely riled Jurgen Klopp, which I think that was the one sort of maybe positive on his Everton copybook, was that game in the snow where he got a pen and Allardyce laughed in the press conference because Klopp was fuming, and I think fans maybe warmed to him. And then obviously that was about the pinnacle of his career, really, was getting a draw at Anfield.
Yeah. I understand to an extent that why he played the tactics he did. I understand also why people moaned about him. The problem is that he come into a club that had absolutely no pace in the back four. Williams, Jags, we had Murray, didn't we? We had really slow defenders. So I understand for the first month, that December, why he played such a deep sitting formation and we headed balls away, and I understand that for a while, but it does come to a point where you do have to show Everton fans that you're made of a bit more than just sitting deep and kicking along. I understand why he did it, and he will never have done anything differently. That's sort of his philosophy, if you want to call it that, is how to be football. It riles people up, and he ultimately cost him his job, was his style of football, amongst other things. But I think the style of football was the stick to beat him with. But going back anyway to that Anfield game, I think that was the pinnacle of his Everton career, and it was probably the pinnacle of that season for me, because there was just so much good about it that we hadn't seen before, especially defensively. But I also did think we had a bit of balance in that second half, where we limited them to very little. They just scored, I think, did they just win 6-0 against Maribor or someone?
They were winning convincingly games. That was
before.
That was, they still had Coutinho, and they were winning games by about 4 goals, even. And it was one of them. No one really gave us a prayer going into that game, and we got something, which was, I was obviously very pleasantly surprised. I didn't watch the game, thank God, because I think I boycotted watching games when Allardyce was appointed. I'll be honest with you. I never watched a live Everton game. I'd watch every now and then on Match of the Day. Sometimes if we ended up pleasantly surprised, but to be honest, I really sort of disengaged myself from following Everton while he was the manager, and I think I can speak for a lot of Everton fans out there that distanced themselves from Sam Allardyce's Everton, even though they've been supporting the club for years. I'm not sure if you guys were like that.
No, but I was like that towards the end of Martinez. I just wouldn't watch the games. I just couldn't stand him, and I can't stand him to this day. But with Allardyce, I sort of grinned and bared it, because I understand it all from his point of view. From the board, it was scandalous. It was absolutely scandalous why they gave him the job in the first place, knowing all that what comes with Sam Allardyce. And then I'm sure we'll go on it, giving him about 40-50 million to spend in January on Tosin and Walcott, even though they knew they weren't going to keep him beyond the summer. I just didn't get any of that. I blame them more than Allardyce for how it went.
I mean, it was a disastrous move. I mean, if they were really in that, I haven't said that. I'm saying, what was the alternative to bringing Allardyce in at that stage? Did we stick with Unsworth, who was completely a fish out of water? Or is it bring Moyes back, who's just a watered down Allardyce, pretty much?
He went to West Ham, though.
I mean, whether you like Allardyce or not, he does a better job of fighting fires than Moyes does, because look what he did to Sunderland.
Yeah, by the time Allardyce was appointed, it's there were no other options, but that was the indictment on the board that they'd let it get to that point. Just going on to the point on the Liverpool game, the tactics wise, I had no problem with them playing like that against the better teams, especially Liverpool, who at the time were on fire, and have kicked on since then. Obviously, they got to the Champions League final that year as well. This wasn't like years and years ago where Liverpool were more of a closer match. We were a lot worse, and Liverpool was probably nearly as good as they are now. So when he's playing like that against them, no problem. But when it got to like a month later, and John Joe Kenny has the first shot on target in 5 games, and it's a speculative, punt at the goal, and the Gladys Street get up and cheer. Ironically, that's when you can see that the style is letting them down. And it wasn't even the case of, these players, it's not his fault he didn't buy them all. It's like, yeah, but 1 shot on target in 5 games. And at that point, he was like bottom of all the attacking metrics. It's just like, wasn't this supposed to be, I'm going to prove that that's not true, this negative football tag that follows me around? It's like, come on, mate. He had at that point, he had Walcott, he had, Balassi on the other side. He wasn't devoid of pace completely. He did have quicker players and eventually Tosin, who had more of a presence up front. The tactics were absolutely dreadful, and I genuinely think I don't know. Maybe I would have felt differently at the time, but I think sticking by Koeman, in hindsight, may have been just as good as going with Allardyce. Because what did Allardyce do once he got it? He beat a load of shite at home, basically. He just did what any other manager would have done. And when he took over, he was joint 12th with 5 points above the drop zone, so there was no fire to put out. Like, he was 5 points clear. He tried to claim that West Ham game, but I was at that West Ham game, so if he won that match, so did I, because I had as bad as much input as he did. I'm 1 for 1 in my Everton managerial career if he's counting that as a game. Yeah, the tactics didn't bother me against the bigger, better teams. We were not a good team at the time, but we weren't the 19th or 20th best team in the division going forwards, which is what we looked like, and what the stats bore out at the end of the season for the attacking stats.
Yeah, I get that, but it wasn't as much the tactics that annoyed me at first. It was more the fact that the club were happy to just sell away everything that they were supposed to be trying to build at the club at the time for 6 months just to stay in the division. We weren't West Brom or anywhere. We were down then. We were bad, but my key issue is with the board, because you could put Sam Allardyce in Man City, he's still going to play a low block formation. It's not going to change whatever you do with Sam Allardyce. The board should have had the insight before they appointed him.
And obviously, like you say, Owen, I think it disrupts the momentum that you're trying to build. You're trying to be an expansive team, then suddenly you're playing a low block, and then obviously you bring in Silver again. And he goes back to this expansive thing. It's a whole load of gobbledygook. It's like the players don't know whether they're coming or going. And it's just, like you say, it's just sort of disrupts the sort of progress that we're trying to make in terms of kicking on. And I think that was another thing, the ethical side of things. I mean, I think obviously he was already had a bad name in the press before he came here. He got the sack from England over some corruption scandal. And I mean, again, it's from a club who's always sort of presented themselves with a lot of grace and a lot of like morality. It didn't seem like a good move on that front either from a PR perspective.
No, but I had an issue with that. That was another.
I mean, his appointment just was a hit of the panic button by the whole club. Whether it was warranted or not, obviously we've got opinions on that, but that's what it was. The club thought, oh my God, we might actually go down, and then the stadium and the charity and everything, like all that's null and void once you're out the division, because we can't afford it. And they panicked and just basically said whatever he was brought in and said keep us in the division, but then very quickly it bore out like, oh, we weren't actually in as much trouble as we thought, because clubs who were in danger are like 5 points adrift with 4 games left, whereas when you're in December, you're not even into the heat. When you're December 2nd, I think was his first game, and he was 5 points.
Yeah.
5 points above the drop zone on his first day at Everton training, and 13th, joint 12th. He must have thought, I've landed on my feet here. This is not like the other jobs where I've got to just come in and do it straight away. And the job found him out. It literally proved everything that had been thrown against him for years was true. It's like, it's not that you don't get the opportunity. You've got the opportunity now. Other than this was the biggest club job he'd ever had by a mile.
He's just a limited manager.
He couldn't hack it. It wasn't even the foot. I know most people it was the football, but for me it was his personality. It was everything he'd done. Like I couldn't get past how his total lack of respect for the club. And the things he used to like. I've read his book. Like he genuinely says in the book that he used to wind up West Ham fans on purpose, and that's what he was doing with us, even though you knew what he was doing. People, still went for it. Myself especially. he was winding up supporters because he knew he didn't like them. We had the survey, do you remember that?
Oh, the survey.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
give us 11, didn't he?
Yeah, he basically had the board apologise to him for supporters saying they didn't like you. Well, you're the manager on a lot of money every year. You need to get on with it if fans don't like you. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe have a think why the fans don't like you.
I know. So everything I've touched on it already. Like laughed at us after Burnley. He said I've had big jobs before. West Ham and Newcastle. It's like they haven't won a raffle between them. Piss off. Like what are you talking about? Like that just shows how he didn't get the clubs. Like you do understand how bad that sounds when you're comparing clubs like that to Everton's going. I'm not saying Everton, have won things in recent years, but we're bigger than the two of them put together. But not in his head because no one was bigger than him. I don't know. He's another thing in his book as well is he learned from Alistair Campbell to just to completely overload the press with information and you'll change the narrative. So that's what he does every time he's in front of a TalkSport microphone or whatever it is. Yeah. If ever Everton are brought up, he just talks and tries to rewrite history. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But he'll say he says we played scintillating stuff at him at Everton at times. And it's like, not once did you do that. And then when any stats are thrown at him and says, well, actually, you were 19th for dribbles, you were 20th for shots, 20th for shots on target, he'll go, well, we didn't have the players to play good football. It's like, well, we thought it was scintillating, mate. Like, it's just, he's just an absolute scam of a manager. He's a con man. He's the Donald Trump of football. He's good to a point, but he tried to blag this club and our supporters, and it just didn't work. That's why everyone hated him. We were winning games sometimes and still singing F off Sam Allardyce in the away end. Like, there's a reason for that. It's not, you know what I mean?
That says it all when you're not even happy when you win. I think that says you're not the right manager for the club.
We had 6 home games, I think, from middle of January to the middle of April, and not one of us could say anything that happened in any of them 6 games apart from the Moreland against City. And we won them as well. Brian.
Well, the only game after the only win, after the draw against Liverpool that you can remember is the Leicester one, because Seamus Coleman came back and ran it. Like, that's not to do with Allardyce. It was just the Seamus Coleman game.
I can remember Tosin scoring 2 in the snow against Stoke.
Oh, yeah, you know what I remember from that? I remember him licking his own snot on the touchline.
Sam did that?
Yeah, there was a picture of him. He was like that, with his hood up on the touchline, licking his top lip while his nose dribbled. I thought, there is the picture of Sam Allardyce.
In a nutshell.
And that's the picture of Everton at the minute. I just thought, what players are we going to bring in?
What a play for that.
I know, and he's sitting there going, I'll be interested in Jack Wilshere. I said that on TalkSport. He basically said,
the Bamiyang.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute, but I'd be interested in Jack Wilshere in the summer. It's like, yeah, Wilshere and Rooney in centre midfield, that'd be brilliant.
My God.
Physios running on with a pack of Lambert and Butler rather than any water or anything. Oh yeah, that was another one. Wanted Aubameyang. I don't hold the transfers against him because that was the club in general. Like Walcott and Tosin, yeah, he will have signed off and said okay, but he won't have been behind that. That was more Steve Walsh for me. But he said that since, hasn't he? We wanted Aubameyang but wouldn't pay the money. Well, Aubameyang went for like 54 million and we spent like 49 on the 2 players we did buy. So I don't think you're telling the truth there, Sam. I think he may have been looked at and then that didn't go any further, but he tries to paint it like he was in for Aubameyang.
Again, it's just another
to bring it back around to him though. In his defence, we did nearly catch Burnley up in 7th.
I know. If only we'd have, actually won at Burnley when we were in a good position. Can't blame him for everything though. Like Ashley Williams had a part to play in that. And what have you. Like there was a lot. And I mean a lot of gutless players. Not like he wasn't an Everton manager, but there was a lot of players who weren't Everton players at that time as well. So he wasn't by himself.
No. Yeah. To be fair, he did bin off Williams in the end. No, we never did see him again after that Burnley game.
Yeah, but that was the one good thing he did. And I mean, I was about to ask you, are there any other positives before we wrap this segment up? So, Terry, any positives about Allardyce?
No, I feel like he's like an ex-girlfriend who I liked at one point, but now I've gone off so badly because of a bad experience. Like, I actually really liked Allardyce in a sort of he's funny kind of way before he came to Everton, but then when he was at my club, I was like, oh, no, it's not funny anymore.
He's despicable.
I was when he got the boot, I was on holiday and I was on a cruise because I'm about 80, but I was on a cruise because it was both my missus' birthday, and I was in Gibraltar, and I just went on the ale massively when I looked at my phone and Sam Allardyce has been dismissed from Everton, and I was like, oh, yes. It was like fresh air. You could breathe fresh air at the club again. Not all the problems at the club weren't his making, but he was one of the big ones, and I was so glad to be shot of him, and I'm sad to this day that he can look back on his career and say I was the Everton manager. I wish he'd get another job, so his last job in football wasn't us, and we can sort of scrub us off when he gets interviewed, because every time he gets interviewed now, he's asked about England, and he's asked, and Everton comes up because of his last club job. Can someone just be struggling next season and give him a call, please?
Yeah. Anything you've got to say, Owen, before we wrap up?
No, nothing really positive other than I just think that maybe to play devil's advocate, really, I don't think, if I'm being totally honest, the manager that come after and the manager that came before, sort of, I think in a kind of perverse way he was better than both of them, but in a shorter period, and who knows, he might have been found out even more in his next season.
I think that's for sure, but equally, I mean, wonder whatever happened to that Marco Silva after we didn't get him in the November. Well, there you have it. That's the end of the Sam Allardyce segment, and I think I speak for all of us when I say thank goodness for that. As always, guys, get commenting on the video. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know your opinions on Allardyce as the Everton boss. Dare we even ask? Like and subscribe to While You're At It, and thank you for watching on the Toffee Blues.